Welcome to Season 2 of the Lipoedema podcast, hosted by Shell and Tiana. Our aim is to make noise around lipedema and educate as many people as we can about this disease.
Our guest list contains professionals who work in the field and women who live with lipedema. Thank you for joining us.
Jen is an experienced professional with a strong background in human resources and the hospitality industry. She currently serves as the chair of Lipoedema Australia, where she brings her wealth of professional experience to the role. Jen is highly regarded for her exceptional organisational skills and is meticulous planning. Her love for spreadsheets is well known and has been demonstrated through her successful co-organisation of the 2022 Lipoedema Australia National Conference. By bringing together a diverse range of speakers and exhibitors, Jen provided an important platform for attendees to learn about lipedema and connect with others in the community. This event played a significant role in raising awareness and offering support to those affected by lipedema. Beyond her professional endeavours, Jen is passionate about supporting individuals impacted by lipedema. She actively works towards increasing public awareness and providing assistance to those in need. As a new mother, she doesn't have much spare time between looking after her two young boys and her volunteer work with Lipoedema Australia. However, she one day hopes to get back into her old hobbies of photography and travelling. Welcome back to the Lipoedema podcast. We are your hosts, Shell
and Tiana, and today we are joined by Jen Bartlett from Lipoedema Australia. Welcome, Jen. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me again.
Oh, it's a pleasure. We are so keen to chat to you about what has been happening in Lipoedema Australia. And I'm sure you must have taken a little break over, just a smidgen of a break over Christmas. But we're keen to find out how last year went for you, and then we can talk about what's going on in 2024.
Yeah, look, it was an incredible year. We had so much activity. It's hard to summarize. When we had our AGM towards the end of last year, I had to write down kind of everything that we had done through the year. And I think it ended up being, from memory, almost 2 pages worth of dot points of different things that we had done throughout the year. And, it was just, there were so many things. So obviously, if I try and think kind of from the beginning, so we added 5 new board members at the beginning of last year, which, from a recruitment perspective, 5 new members into a board that's already existing, it's a huge process. It's a huge amount that they needed to learn. And I think that's overall gone really successfully. And, we had June Awareness Month, and we released the GP checklist, which women can take to appointments with their doctors. We went to different expos last year, which we had never kind of done before. So that was a really good experience. We had the Prax Hub webinar, and I'm sure I'm forgetting something else that was at the very end. Oh, the MP meetings that we also had.
Sounds like
so much
busy.
on. Jam-packed agenda.
Oh, it honestly was. I think particularly during September, October, November, there was a lot of activity. We're in constant meetings, and it was very busy.
Sounds like it's gained some momentum
awesome.
and traction. Would you agree compared to previous years, or you've just been go, go, go from the beginning?
No, I think I would agree with that. I suppose we do need to respect that there was COVID. And so I think that was part of the reason that there had been a bit of a lull. We had dealt with COVID for a number of years, and we were really limited in what we could do. Particularly, there's so many women with lipedema that do have other health conditions that we need to be conscious of. And so we were quite mindful of that kind of through particularly 2020, 2021. And then we managed to have the conference in 2022 in the middle of the year. But, that was real touch and go as to whether that could even be in person at points, because we needed to do right by the women with lipedema, and we didn't want to put them in a risky situation.
That's fair. So speaking of women with lipedema, how have you gone with your lipedema lately?
It's a really interesting question. So I can't remember. I think the last time we spoke was about 6 months ago. I think my baby at the time was 4 months. He's now 10 months. So I've had a real rocky journey with my son. He is, we're dealing with a whole host of allergies, and I, in the process, have had to go on quite a severe elimination diet in order to support his health and well-being. And so it's really interesting. I don't know if I would have been able to do this for me, which is sad, right? It's really sad that I don't know I would have had the dedication to go to the lengths that I have for him, for myself, but I have for him. And so, yeah, in terms of my lipedema, I've lost weight. So I've lost about 9 kilos since August when I started this diet. It's interesting. So I'm finding I'm bruising a lot more, but that's probably deficiencies rather than my lipedema as such. My lipedema is looking a little bit better, but, that's probably just natural other weight loss rather than the lipedema itself. But aside from that, to be honest, I've not been doing too much because my cup has been pretty empty with everything that's going on with him and, everything going on with the board and how busy I've been with that there's not been, to be honest, there's been no time for me.
Yeah, we all end up putting ourselves last, don't we? And have you come to find out what allergies your son did have, or it's still an ongoing process?
No, it's still ongoing. So he's just started daycare last week, which is very difficult when you're trying to say to a daycare you can't feed him. I think I gave them a list of 16 different things that he can't eat at the moment. And in saying that, he doesn't necessarily have 16 allergies, but we went through a period of time where he was not gaining any weight at all. And I went, well, cutting one allergen out at a time is not going to be a wise decision. And so I made the decision to cut everything out at once. And so, yeah, it's not necessarily that he's going to react to all of those things, but we need to introduce them one by one. And so, no, but he did react to chicken last week, which was a real shame from my perspective, because when you go out on the menu, it's normally beef and chicken, and we're off both beef and chicken.
Wow, that's such a massive undertaking.
Yeah, it is. It's been really challenging.
I did it with my son too. My son, he was having like just intolerances, not so much like anaphylaxis or anything like that, but something was going on. He was vomiting all the time. And so we cut out gluten and dairy to start with. And we saw a huge improvement just from those two things. But I can't imagine having to cut out like chicken and beef.
Our original, if I can remember, our original list was dairy, soy, egg, gluten, including oat, tree nut, peanut, legume, chicken, beef, coconut, rice, and corn. And corn is in everything.
Sorry.
Like if you've never had to avoid corn.
Can I ask a silly question?
What am I eating?
Yeah. What are you eating? What can you eat?
So for a long period of time, and I also cut out coconut as well because I thought he was reacting to coconut. So for a long period of time, I was on turkey and lamb and vegetables and fruit. But he has since had an FPIES reaction, which I'm not sure if you've ever heard of FPIES. And, this really isn't relevant to lipedema. But for anyone that hasn't heard of it, it is a food protein-induced severe vomiting event. It's basically like anaphylaxis, but rather than reacting in hives and swelling, you violently vomit. So he's had 2 FPIES episodes, and the 2 common foods were pumpkin and lamb. So now pumpkin and lamb are also on our cannot consume list because the risk of that happening again, it gets worse each time.
So what can you eat, Jen?
So I've mostly been eating fish, lamb and turkey and vegetables and fruit.
So that would take a lot of prep time, would it? Because you're not having any, like you can't have any convenience or, breads and wraps and things like that, which always a quick
nothing
help.
Convenience. Breakfast was the hardest for me because, I'm trying to get the kids to daycare in the morning and having to then, so for a while for breakfast, I was having kind of Mexican style mince with sweet potato in it and a bit of quinoa just to see me through the day with some avocado as well. And whilst it was really delicious, it's not very practical to cook, every second morning. So we have now managed to have successfully got oats recently. that was what I had for my birthday a few weeks ago. Oats was my birthday treat. So now I'm basically having oats for breakfast every day because it's easy and quick.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be a huge help.
Yeah, massive.
Wow, bravo to you. That's such a massive undertaking for you and your whole family.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, let's switch over and talk about you at Lipoedema Australia. Can we talk about the meetings you've been having with MPs? Like, how has that been going?
Yeah, really good. So we've had 3 meetings so far, and I'm hoping to have another one early this year. I keep going to say next year, but it's now this year, I'm sure, as everyone does at this time of year. So yeah, we had 3 meetings. So the first was with Jed Kearney, who's the Assistant Health Minister. And that went really, really well. It was a really good meeting. And I'm not going to lie, this is my first lobbying that I've ever done. And whilst I have an amazing support network behind me, both Lucy and I, who went into the meeting, we were like, just before we went in, we're like, who runs this? Like, do we run it? Do they run it? Like, do we ask the questions? Do they ask the questions? And so I just said that to her as soon as we got in. I said, oh, like, I'm just letting you know, this is the first time we've done this. So, yeah, how does this work? And she goes, you run the meeting, we'll ask some questions. And I was like, okay, got it, let's do this. So we basically went in and we've asked for a number of things. So Lipoedema Australia operates right now solely on donations, basically from the lipedema community. And so we went in asking for support for a budget submission that we are about to put through. Which she was really supportive of. She didn't balk at it, which I expected. And yeah, it was a fantastic meeting. And then from there, we met with 2 MPs up here in Sydney, and we kind of targeted certain areas based on what they were. So they were 2 Teal MPs for federal government. And both of those meetings went really well. So one was with Zali Stegel, and she was just really fascinated by it. She asked lots of really good questions, and she actually said her and her advisor would go and do some further research because they were quite curious as to who the world leader is with research. And yeah, it was really good.
So each of the meetings you went in with the same aim, like you wanted the same things from everybody?
Yeah, it was very similar. Obviously, what we went into Jed with was a bigger ask overall. We've also asked for her to come to the conference next year. She's Melbourne-based, and being the Assistant Health Minister, we are really hoping that she will be there. And then of the 2 Sydney MPs, it was similar. So we basically said to them, will you support our budget request and write to Jed Kearney with your support? So kind of, they'll do their bit to her. She'll then do her bit from there.
Nice. Wow. Fantastic. Yeah, that would have been so nerve-wracking being the first time you sort of gone into one of those meetings. I'm just thinking, putting myself in your shoes. Yeah, but how wonderful that you did that, like, for us.
Yeah, no, it was really good. And so there's exciting things to happen. So there's more. There is obviously more to it. I'm not going to give everything away in this, but yeah, there's more to it, and hopefully we're going to have further productive meetings early this year, and then we can announce from there what we're hoping to get done.
Excellent. So one of the really practical things that came out of last year is that GP checklist that our community can take to their GPs to really support the discussion in terms of symptoms. So what's the feedback been on that from the community?
Yeah, really positive feedback. Sorry, both from the lipedema community, but actually from the GP community. So I know that we'll probably touch on this in a few minutes, but we attended the Wonka conference, which is a World GP conference. And that was one of the things that we had on display at that conference. And so, we did have some GPs that came up to us and knew absolutely nothing. And so we would obviously give them the spiel about what lipedema is about, point to the banner behind us, say this is what it could look like. But we also went through that checklist. And From memory, I attended 2 of the days, and everyone was really supportive of it and said that it would be really helpful if their patient came to them with it. I think particularly when there's such a lack of knowledge within the GP community, I think it just helps to bridge that conversation. And so, it enables the lipedema patient to go in and say, hey, like, I think I've got this, because, like, I don't know about you both, but when I go to the GP, I have to write a list of what I'm there for because I often forget. But also, particularly if the conversation's not going the way you would expect it to go, which most GPs haven't heard of lipedema, so it's not unsurprising. Particularly if there's a bit of, if they're a bit dismissive, it kind of helps to guide that conversation a bit further. And you can say, well, I've got all these symptoms. What else could it point to? And I think it almost allows you to put it back on them to say, well, if you don't think that I have this, what is it?
Yep, absolutely. Because they can, if they are trying to dismiss you, like having that checklist there and being able to say, oh, but look, what about this then? How do you explain this? Like, that is a perfect resource for that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because, so much of it is blamed on our weight, right? It's, there's always that meme, have you tried losing weight when you've gone in for something completely unrelated? And whilst, it does give us a good giggle, it's a bit sad that that's the reality for so many of us. But, if you're then saying to them, that's fine that you think it's related to my weight, but can you explain how this symptom specifically relates to me having excess weight on my body?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like when we go into the GP and they only have 5 to 10 minutes to sort of work out what's wrong with us, having an idea about what your diagnosis is, it's not making them start from scratch. So this checklist is a really good thing, but we have to know what lipedema is. So going the next step and having those information packs that you've also developed to get that out to the wider community so that they can understand there is such thing called lipedema and here's what it looks like and here's what might be happening with you. That's like another really good step into, just bringing something to your clinician instead of just saying, look at me, what is wrong with me? Because they'll go straight to the weight.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, a lot of the time, most women just don't think that there's anything wrong because they just normalize it, right? We all think that we're just, I think, Shelley, you've said it before, like, you just think you're misshapen and that's just how you are. You don't go, oh yeah, there is, like, this isn't right. This isn't normal.
And especially if there's a family history, like a lot of the warriors we've had on, they're like, oh, we were just the big knees of the family, or we're just, childbearing hips of the family. That's just the way we are. And so if you don't realize that it's not normal, like, you wouldn't even know. Like, Tiana and I have also been like, well, what's the first thing someone would search? Like, if you were wanting answers about your leg, like, what words do you even put into Google to try and work this out? You're not going to put in lipedema.
Yeah. Well, I know personally I put in flesh pain and I managed to find it that way.
Flesh pain.
Flesh pain, yeah. Because for me, it wasn't like, I can't remember if I went into this in my first chat with you both, but for me it was, I danced, not professionally, but, I'd had my fair share of injuries over the years and I knew the difference between kind of ligament pain and tendon pain, and it was not either of those. It was flesh pain. It's the only way I could describe it.
Fascinating. Yes. Flesh pain. Oh, we really need those keywords. We need a list of them. Okay, so we've been talking about GPs. So tell us about the Prax Hub webinar that was you were in partnership with. Is that correct? How did that go? I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, it went really, really well. We had, from the back end, not that, most people attending would realise, we had some technical issues joining the actual event. But no, it went really well. I was really happy with how it went. And, Ramin and Lucy did an amazing job kind of conveying everything in such a short period of time as well. So, yeah, it was really well received. I've only heard positive feedback. I suppose in fairness, maybe someone's not going to call me up and say, hey, that was really bad. But based on all the positive feedback I've had, I think it went really well.
Do you know the numbers of how many people accessed that webinar?
From memory, I think we were meant to have 900 in attendance that night. I can't remember what the final number was. And since then, I think a couple hundred more have accessed it. In fairness, we've not really done much marketing of it since kind of post the event. We did that one post saying, hey, it's out there. But so I think there's a lot more that can be done in terms of sharing it and getting those view numbers a lot higher. But yeah, it's a great resource, and it's going to be there for 12 months, so until October this year. So we should try and use that to our advantage. And CPD points have just started again at 0 for a lot of for the GPs. So, it's a good time to go to the GP and say, oh, hey, there's this course. You could go do it for free.
Excellent.
And how did you get the doctors on board to start with? Was that how did you handle that?
Do you mean as in Ramin who spoke, or the GPs who attended the event?
The attendees.
Yeah, so there was a marketing strategy that we had with Prax Hub directly. So we obviously paid them to do some marketing to GPs. So they've got, within their platform, I can't remember how many GPs they've got, but they did a mail out to their GPs saying, hey, this event's on, this is what it's covering. And then, we obviously shared it through our socials, through our newsletter. I think through our newsletter, we actually got a large number of attendees. So people opening that newsletter, then taking it to their GP. So it was really helpful for us to be able to track where that was all coming from as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the feedback as well, sorry, I should cover this. The feedback that we got from the attendees, because after it's finished, they're then asked to fill out a survey on how did you find this education session. The feedback from the attendees overall was really positive. There were a few that said, I thought I was doing a session on lymphedema. Like, I was so shocked and feel so I feel so much more informed now about what this is. And, I think that's a great thing, right? Like, they've gone in there, they've thought that they're learning about something else, and then they've been enlightened about lipedema. It's great.
Awesome.
No, that is awesome. That is really good.
Okay, so Shell and I have been talking recently about the Lipoedema conference in June, and we are very excited to join you there in Melbourne. But chat to us about what the community can expect from this conference.
Yeah, so I think so there's 2 separate cohorts, we'll call them. So there's kind of the medical cohort, so your health practitioners, and we have a day specifically for them on the Friday. So at that we'll have Karen Herbst, Tara Carnesis, and we'll have others as well. I think those are the ones that we've announced at this point. Then Friday night will be our welcome celebration. So we'll have a few canapes, and, we'll be able to meet the exhibitors, walk around the exhibition and see all the products. And then from Saturday, it's open for everyone. So all of the sessions are for both lipedema patients, but also for health practitioners as well. So it's a real mixed bag over the 2 days of the workshops in terms of what it's talking about. We're still finalising. Well, actually, no, that's a stretch. We haven't finalised everything at all yet. So submissions for abstracts close, I think it's this month from memory. And so from there, we'll then bed down what the actual program looks like.
Very cool. Oh, we can't wait. We're excited.
We're so excited because we didn't get to the 2022 one because we weren't diagnosed until late in that year. Like, we were both like November, December. So, we didn't even know about the world of lipedema when the last one was on. So we're very excited about that.
Yeah, well, the 2022 conference was my first. So I was diagnosed just before the 2018 conference. But at the time, I was too nervous to go on my own, to be honest. It was up in the Gold Coast. I would have had to travel. And, it's that whole thing if you don't want to not know anyone. And so I made the decision not to attend. So for me, organising 2022 and obviously attending it was the first conference that I had attended. But to be honest, I couldn't tell you a word that was said because I was so focused on organising that I have no idea what was going on behind me. Yeah.
It's all a blur when you're organising an event. It's just what you need to do, and then at the end you're like, oh my gosh, it's finished. What happened? Was it good?
That's exactly
Were we
right.
good?
Yeah, I said to Janine, who's our vice chair, I was like, do we still have all of the sessions recorded? Because I think I might need to watch them at some point.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, I asked on our Instagram page if anyone had any questions for you, and there was just the one question, and we did touch on it last time, and that was in regards to Medicare and how we go around all the Medicare, like getting any sort of support. Are you able to talk a little bit into that again for our audience?
Yeah, so that's part of what the part of that budget submission that I mentioned earlier. Part of that is ensuring that we have the research. So we have put down that we want research done in terms of a study of what the impact is to not treat lipedema up front. So we need to prove to the government, right? We know that we need to prove to the government this is going to cost them more in the long run, so they should really deal with it earlier. But what we have also said, and I said this in the meeting to Jed, is that we actually don't think that they need to find extra money. We think that their funds that they've directed into the obesity strategy could be redirected to us. So it's not that they're going to need to come up with, whatever amount per year. It's just they need to shuffle it around a little bit to cater for us. So I suppose a long-winded answer is that last time I said we still require the research, and that's still the case. We still require the research for the submission for Medicare funding, and we're now at the point where we're asking government for help to support that, because one piece of research alone is $300,000, and we don't have that kind of money ourselves.
Yeah, of course.
Wow,
especially
that's a lot.
When you're solely working on the donations, as we mentioned before.
Yeah.
And I think, you mentioned like how many submissions have to be made for it to even come up. I think it was it lymphedema that, there was like hundreds of bits of research that had to go into
heaps of research, but I think from memory they had to submit, I think it was 5 times. They had to alter their submission because they weren't covering everything that needed to be covered. And in fairness, I don't know the exact details of it, but that's kind of the feedback I've been provided. So, I still think, so in the strategy for Lipoedema Australia, it's in our 10-year strategy. It's certainly not something that's going to happen kind of in the next, to be honest, I can't see a submission happening in the next year. It'll probably be a few more than that.
Yeah. And so I don't know if you know the answer to this, Jen, and I probably could Google it and figure it out. But so in America, they don't have Medicare, but they do have like private health insurance, and some private health insurers cover lipedema. So is that something that could happen here, that maybe if you've got private health, they could cover or help you out?
To be honest, I think it's a really different system. So, and I will disclose that I have no idea about our private health system in, great detail. But my understanding is that private health basically don't cover anything that doesn't have a Medicare number. So once we have a Medicare number, we can then get the coverage from private health for all the hospital cover. And so, you will save, and it's still probably not going to be a significant amount that we'll save, but you'll save some money.
Yeah.
But until there's that Medicare number, private health are under no obligation, basically, to cover it.
Yeah,
they're certainly not going to volunteer to do it.
It's not recognised until it's got that number attached to it.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I understand that bit now.
which I think, and it might be an important thing to mention, that is why some of the surgeons, or specifically Ramin, he has been using codes for lymphedema, because within his research, he has proven there's a degree of lymphedema in all lipedema patients. And so because of that research, he's been using lymphedema codes for his patients, and that's why some of them do get a rebate. Whereas I don't think, at least to my knowledge, I don't think any of the other surgeons in Australia are using that because they don't have the research to back it up.
Well, in my case specifically, I was tested by under ultrasound for lymphedema, and there was evidence of it. So my surgeon got to use that code, and I'm not sure whether under the same train they sort of argue that there's some evidence of it within all lipedema. I'm not sure, but in my case it was, and I was lucky/unlucky to have 2 diagnoses instead of 1, I guess, because it helped me in the end a little bit with some money. Okay, so now I want to chat to you about Lipoedema Australia sent out a call to fill out a survey, and they sent it out to the lipedema community. And I'm keen to hear from you about the results of that survey and what happens with that information now. So, what did you find, and what's for the future?
Yeah, so we had over 1,000 women fill out that survey, and to be honest, we created that survey so that I could go into that meeting with Jed. It was specifically the meeting with Jed we had it in mind for, and I could show her kind of what the results were. And in fairness, the survey shut, I think it was on Monday night, and my meeting with her was Tuesday afternoon. So it was real preliminary kind of findings. And we did let her know that we're still at the early stages of cutting the data. But it showed some really interesting things. And it also, to be honest, it showed some really sad things. We had quotes. So I took a 4-page glossy to her just with some of the results that we had extrapolated from that survey. And on one of the pages, we just had some direct quotes from women. But, it's hard to convey what so many people are feeling in one document. So that was a very small sample size. But to be honest, just myself reading through some of the extended responses about kind of what it's done in terms of impacting your life, some of them were heartbreaking. And so, to be fair, as I said, we have kind of had a really busy October, November, December, just with life. Everyone gets busy. So we haven't done too much further with it at this stage, but we need to continue cutting that data and using that data and sharing with everyone what the findings were.
Oh, great. I'll be really keen to hear about that when you all get back in the swing of things, because everybody deserves to have a rest, including Lipoedema Australia, and December was the best chance to do that over the Christmas period. So looking forward to getting a bit more information. That's great.
I think also as well, I don't know if we touched on it. I don't think we did. So we attended a fitness and wellness expo in Sydney.
Yes.
And at that, we took the opportunity to survey randomly as you can get, 201 women about lipedema. So it was a symptom and history survey. And then we also had photos of women with lipedema, basically saying, do you identify with any of these? And based on that, we believe that the incidence rate of lipedema in Australia is higher than 11%. And that's the first study that has been done. And so that's something else that we're asking for, is we need more money. We need to conduct that survey again, and we need it on a much larger scale. Because if you think about it, the population that was there was potentially biased because, it was a fitness and wellness expo. And that's not to say that we don't have fit lipedema women, but I'm guessing that the women whose mobility is limited probably wouldn't be attending an event like that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah. Do you think when it comes to encouraging governments to Medicare to add a code, if you say that the prevalence is higher, that would disincentivize them to create a code because it will just be too expensive for them to manage?
Yeah, so there's two things. So obviously if it's too high of a number, as you just said, it could be too expensive. But I think the second thing, and it's a good point, is that if it's too high of a number, well, is that just a norm? Is that just a variation of normal? And is it actually an issue? Or is it just that's how some women are? And so that is the other risk, is that they could then argue that it's not actually an issue, which until we have, specific biomarkers and everything, then it's hard to prove.
Yeah, which is why we need the research, right? Because it actually does negatively impact our lives as we progress through the stages. You know, if you don't have it, your mobility isn't limited, and yeah, that's really difficult.
Like I think the lived experience survey, if I remember correctly, 11% of women have exited the workforce due to their lipedema, and I think there was a further 11 or 12% that have had to reduce their working hours due to their lipedema. And so if you consider that's 20% of the lipedema community, that's a huge number of women that aren't then contributing to tax, and it actually has financial implications to the government as well.
Right. Yeah. I never thought of it that way, but you're so right.
Yeah, obviously it's got financial implications of that individual themselves, and potentially then they're claiming a benefit. So it's multifaceted, really.
Yeah, it impacts every aspect of their life and of the economy as well.
Yeah.
Equally complex to measure as well, or to quantify.
Yeah.
Jen, we've got one more thing we want to talk to you about before we let you go.
Yep.
Now, we want to talk about the pronunciation of lipedema and why it's important that we make sure we say lipedema.
Yeah, so this is something that Lipoedema Australia went out with earlier. I think we went out with it in June Awareness Month in 2023. On the back of my shirt, not that you can see, but on the back of my shirt, it has the phonetic pronunciation of how it should be said. So, look, obviously, lipedema, lipedema, they both mean the same thing, but we feel that the pronunciation needs to be lipedema in Australia, because if you say lipedema, it's too similar to lymphedema, but it's also too similar to lipidemia, which is a blood condition that I, in fairness, know absolutely nothing about.
Yeah.
But you see when people come onto the Lipoedema Australia Facebook group, and often they'll write, you see it all the time, lipidemia. And sometimes I'll go and correct them and say, hey, just so you know, the spelling's actually lipedema, because it is really important. Like, if you feel that you've got this condition, you need to know what it is that you're calling it, for starters.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I think it's important the name kind of pronunciation stays the same for as long as possible. But until it's recognised in this country, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice by saying lipedema. And whilst it is pronounced that way in the US and in Europe, it's just too similar to other medical conditions in this country. And I think it causes too much confusion.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've, a lot of our guests have said, they went to their doctors and they thought they meant lymphedema. So if you're saying lipedema, they're like, oh, hang on a minute, that's not. But if you're saying lipedema, it sounds too much like lymphedema.
Yeah, and also, not that it's related at all, but the way that I think I initially, because when I first heard about lipedema, I was like, I don't know how to say this. I'm just going to avoid saying it because everyone says it differently and I don't know what's right. But the way that I remembered initially was lipedema and liposuction. You know, whilst not everyone will get liposuction and it might not be on everyone's radar, it's at least for me an easy way to remember the way in which to pronounce it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. And they go hand in hand, don't they? It's the same prefix for both of them, that.
Yeah.
Lipo meaning fat. Lipo. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad we cleared that up.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yes, because we will, we are supporting Lipoedema Australia as they support us. And so, yeah, we'll make sure we have the right pronunciation.
Thank you.
Exactly. Well, I feel like
so that is us done.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, another one in the bag. Can you come back tomorrow? We'll do it all again.
We'll do it again. Wait, I've got to figure out the editing side of it, so don't get too carried away.
Yeah, for our listeners, we've got a new fancy new program, and now we have to work out how to bloody use the thing.
All right, thank you, Jen, for being our first guest for our second season.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely happy to come back anytime.
And if you're not back before June, we will see you at the conference in Melbourne.
Sounds good. Are you going to record a podcast at the conference?
Ooh.
Maybe we will. I don't know.
Maybe.
We'll have to get your permission to do whatever we're going to do. So we'll chat offline.
We'll chat before then.
We'll chat. Sounds good.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.
When we started the Lipoedema podcast, we relied on word of mouth and existing connections.
Our following has happened organically, and we are so honoured by your support.
As we learn more about the world of social media and algorithms, we have a request.
When you are listening to our podcast or watching on YouTube, let us know what you think.
Hit follow or subscribe.
Leave us a comment or write a review.
The more engagement we get, the more our message is shared.
And the greater our reach to those women suffering in silence.
Thank you for listening to the Lipoedema podcast. Lipoedema and its symptoms vary from individual to individual. The opinions and advice voiced in this podcast are of a personal nature and used for educational purposes.
Please take away from this podcast what resonates with you, and please see your GP or preferred specialist for diagnosis and healthcare. We are Shelley and Tiana from the Lipoedema podcast. Until our next episode, bye for now.